It's very special to be learning Erev Shavuos. Going to be learning a Sicha about Kabbalah Satira, about the days preceding Kabbalah Satira, specifically Rosh Chodesh Sivan. But before that, it is a joy to announce that our classmate Hindi Borenstein's Enikol had his Arayim Firnish in Cheder. The Chana Perlman's granddaughter's Bas Mitzvah, Chaya Mushka, is taking place. And Chaya Mushka is also the great-granddaughter of David Raskin. And he should be remembered, like Chana wrote, for good. And Chana, I don't know the last name. Chana's grandson is having his Hanachas Atfilin. He is the son of Shmuley and Fredi Hecht. And everybody should have Hasidish Yiddish Nachas, Miter Chava, and Gesund, Frelechaheit, Bonenu, Arevim Ba'adenu. I'm also very excited to share that our son Mendel will be getting married, B'ezras Hashem, this Thursday night. And I'm truly extending a sincere invitation to anyone who is in the area to come join us, not only for dancing, but if you want to come for the Suda, just let me know. Our learning today is dedicated in the schus of the Chassan Hatamim Mendel ben Rivka and his Kala Chayemushka Bas Esther Dvar Leah. They should be zeicha to build a bayis neman b'Yisrael al Yesodei Hater v'Chasidus. And our learning is also Le'iloi Nishmas Naomi Bas Reb David Yehuda, the mother-in-law of Esti Morazov. And now we're going to go straight into the Sicha. Aleph. Ala pasuk b'chodesh hashlishi goimer b'yom hazeh bo midbar Sinai vayichan sham Yisrael neged har. On the pasuk, which is in Parshas Yisro, that says that in the third month, on this day, the first of the month, the Bnei Yisrael came to Midbar Sinai, to the Sinai desert, and they rested there, opposite of the mountain. Amru Chazal, the Gemara says in Shabbos, Shebiyom Hazeh. What does the Torah mean when it says Bayom Hazeh, on this day? Koi al Rosh Chodesh. This refers to Rosh Chodesh. B'hainu, this means Shabias b'nei Yisrael lahar Sinai ha'isa b'yom Rosh Chodesh Sivan ha'chodesh ha'shlishi. That b'nei Yisrael came to the mountain on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Sivan is the third month, counting, of course, from Nisan. Etzem boyam shel b'nei Yisrael lahar Sinai ay b'terem kiblu shamas ha'Torah humala nifla'a b'yoser. The essential coming or arriving of Bnei Yisrael to Mount Sinai, even before they accepted the Torah, is already considered an awesome advantage. And as we say in the Haggadah every year, Ilu kervanu lifnei har Sinai v'lo nasan lanu es haTorah dayenu. If you would have only brought us close to Har Sinai and you would not have given us the Torah, that too would have been enough. So there was some kind of superlative experience associated with coming to Har Sinai even before anything else happened. Vitam hadavar. And what is a way of understanding this? What's the reason? Ki etzem amidas b'nei Yisrael neged ahar, pa'ala bahem ilui nifla. Because essentially just standing at the mountain, opposite the mountain, already affected a very awesome advantage on the part of Bnei Yisrael, an awesome elevation. Kedivrei Chazal, like Rashi quotes from the Mechilta, ala pasuk vayichan sham Yisrael, on the words, and they rested there, Israel. So the Mechilta says, ki ish echad belev echad. It says vayichan, it doesn't say vayachanu in plural, it says vayichan in singular, because they rested there as one person with one heart. Hainu. This means shalideze shachanu neged ahar, that just through their resting there opposite the mountain, his achdu b'nei Yisrael ba'achdus gemura ki ish echad belev echad. Their resting was in a way of unification. They were united as one person with one heart. But seemingly, irrespective of this very great, okay, so they rested there as one person, and this is considered a spectacular level, but there's something that causes us to wonder about Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and that is that Bigemara mituares befratius hapa'ulay she'asa Moshe Rabbeinu kedei lahachenes b'nei Yisrael lekabbalas haTorah. The Gemara in Shabbos describes in great detail the kind of the itinerary of all of the events that took place that Moshe Rabbeinu staged in order to prepare Bnei Yisrael for receiving the Torah. And this all happened b'meshech hayamim shemiboyam lahar Sinai v'ad yom matan Torah. And these events took place in the days between when they came to Har Sinai and the day that they received the Torah. So there's 6 days, 5 days, and then the 6th. So the Gemara says, Beveis Sivan, on the 2nd day of Sivan, Amar Lahu v'atem tiyu limamlaches kayanim. He said to them on behalf of Hashem, you are going to be a kingdom of priests. Begimel Sivan mitzvahs hagbala. On the 3rd day, he delineated exactly how far they could go in proximity to the mountain and where they must hold back. Dalit Sivan hatzivui ala prisha. On the 4th day of Sivan, Moshe Rabbeinu commanded them that the women and the men had to separate and not engage in physical intimacy. Behei Sivan bana mizbeach v'hikriv alav korban. Va'ad lamiras nasa v'nishma alidei kol Yisrael. And on the 5th day of Sivan, the altar was built and karbanos were offered, and this caused Bnei Yisrael to say nasa v'nishma. We will do, and then we will listen and understand and try to take it apart. So all of the days are distinguished by important events that took place. Masha'en came Rosh Chodesh Sivan, Yaim Bayim Lahar Sinai Mavor Sham Shalei Amar Lahu V'Loi Midei. In contradistinction, on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the day that they came to Har Sinai, about that day it says he didn't tell them anything, not one word. Why? The Gemara says Mishum Chulsha De'orcha, because they were travel weary, and it wasn't appropriate for him to talk to them or engage them in the various preparations. Hainu, this means shebiyom zehayu b'nei Yisrael bechalishus machmas terech haderech. They were weak on that day from the difficulty of travel. V'lachein dacha Moshe ha'chanas l'matan Torah ad liyom hamacharas ve'sivan. Because they were so tired and they were exhausted, Moshe pushed the hachanas, he pushed the preparations till the next day to Beis Sivan. Now the Rebbe says, "L'chayra eina muvan klal." Seemingly, this is just it's not understood. First of all, Yeduim divrei Chazal. It's well known what our sages taught us. Shebetzeis b'nei Yisrael miMitzrayim ha'isalehem tshuka atzuma lekabbalas haTorah. When Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, they had this overwhelmingly strong desire to receive the Torah. Ad shesafrus hayamim hanesarim ad matan Torah, and this caused them to count down until matan Torah. Umuvam b'pashtos, and it's self-understood. Shekechol shehiskarev yoim kabbalas haTorah, godla v'hizgabra hishtoikekozu. It's well understood that as the days progressed and they came closer to receiving the Torah, this desire, this overwhelming longing just grew stronger. Balachas kama v'kama, shebevoyem el Har Sinai, and how much more so when they actually arrived at the site of Har Sinai, hamokim sheboi tinasein haTorah, and they knew that was where they were going to receive the Torah. Bevadai ubevadai oyer behem rikshei tshuka v'tzipia chazokim b'yoser lekabbalas haTorah. So for sure, there was this tremendous feeling of longing and anticipation that welled up in them for the receiving of the Torah. And the Rebbe continues, and he further deepens his point. He says, "Ukenira b'chush b'teva b'nei adam," and you could see this practically in human nature. Sheke'asher adam chash tshuka v'ga'aguim azim l'davar misuyim. When a person feels a strong longing and a desire for something specific, azai chulshas v'ayefus haguf ena tefeses etzlim makayim. Then tiredness, weariness doesn't really play a role. And it's not going to stop them in their efforts to receive what they are longing for. And especially as you come so close to receiving what it is you are longing for, so for sure you're not going to feel how tired you are. So it seems to me that the Rebbe is kind of describing like that adrenaline rush that you feel when you land after a very long trip that was miserable and you didn't sleep at all. But in the moment that you land, let's say in Israel, all you feel is this excitement and the fruition of your desire to be there. The imkain tamua. And so then we wonder, hayitachin sheba'amadam b'ma'amadam neged ahar la'achrei kol oisem shvuz v'yam shel gagum l'kabal satara ikiv Moshe Rabbeinu as hachanas b'nei Yisrael l'kabal satara. So we wonder, how is it possible that here they are standing neged hahar? So after 7 weeks of counting down and excitement and anticipation and longing, Moshe Rabbeinu holds back from launching into the preparations of Kabbalah Satira v'Yisera Mizu. And more than this, Kediyuk Lash Chazal, if you want to be specific in the words of the Gemara, Loi Amar Lahem V'loi Midei. He didn't breathe a word, not even one word, about this great event that is about to happen. Hainu. Shaloi Amar Lahem Af Mila Achas Bechol Ha'inin Shal Hachana L'Kabbalah Satira V'chol Zois Mishum Chulsha De'orcha. He didn't say one word to them about preparing for this awesome event. All because of their being travel weary? Really? They didn't even change time zones. V'gam mitzad b'nei Yisrael kasha. And it's also difficult to understand this on the part of b'nei Yisrael. Ech yitachein שהסכימו לנוח ולא יטבו ממשה שישמיע להם משהו על כל פנים בנוגע לקבלת התורה. How is it that on their part they were so sanguine about this and they agreed to rest and they didn't demand from Moshe, please tell us something about what's going to happen in the next few days? Nothing. And then the Rebbe says, "Ubifrat shalei haisa kan tircha de orcha g'dayla ad kedei kach shetigram lechalishas g'dayla." And by the way, what was the big travel weariness? It didn't exist. Sharei Aleph, first of all, Merifidim bad Har Sinai hamerchak ein agadol. First of all, they didn't go directly from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai. They traveled in a certain seder, and they didn't wander. The Jews did not wander in the desert. They had the original GPS, and they were only coming from a place called Refidim, where they had last encamped. And it wasn't such a long way. But Beis, more overarchingly, etzem halicha lo yesa krucha b'tircha yesera. But all of their travels did not entail great difficulty. Kevan sha'anan hakavod halach lefneihem. Because the clouds of glory preceded them. And among the many different miracles that happened, the Mechilta says, V'chol hanamoch magbiyoi, v'chol hagavoya mashpiloi. And one of the things that the clouds of glory did is they basically flattened the terrain. So it wasn't like the Jews were going uphill on mountainous terrain and then down into a valley, because the Mechilta says that any valley was made higher and any elevation was flattened. So basically, they were walking, power walk. They went on a straight way. And on top of this, there's two opinions if Matan Torah was on a Sunday or on a Monday, but either way, it was in close proximity to Shabbos, where they bechlal didn't travel. So what's the big tircha? The imkain hare tamua b'yoser. And when you take all of these ideas into account, all of these circumstances, it's even a greater wonder. Madua haisa etzel b'nei Yisrael chalishus koi gedayla, achlei hayu misugalim lishmaya afilu mila achas, like it says v'loy midei b'negei Kabbalah Satire. So if they were traveling in close proximity to Shabbos from a place that was not that far, and Bechlal, the travel wasn't that difficult because Ananea covered. So what was so difficult that caused them such a great weakness that they weren't capable of listening to Moshe Rabbeinu even one word? In Seif Beis, the Rebbe begins to explain. V'yeshleimer habir bazeh. We might say the explanation is as follows. B'divrei Chazal, in the words of our sages, Cholsha de Orcha, the words are weakness due to the difficulty of the way of travel. Ein hakavana kol kach lechalishas haguf al yedei halicha gashmis b'derech. So the Rebbe explains that these words need to be understood properly, and the main intention is not so much about the weakness of the body, ela beikar lechalishas haruchanis mitzad halicha haruchanis b'derech she'avru az b'nei Yisrael, but rather it's a spiritual weakness due to their spiritual travels on the journey that Bnei Yisrael undertook. Kishem sheyeshna halicha gashmis b'derech mimokem gashmi lemokem gashmi, kach yeshna inishal halicha ruchanis b'derech haruchanis. Just like you have to travel from one place to another geographically, so too there is a journey that has to be undertaken when you go from one spiritual place to another. Adam hoilach mimatzav makim echad beruchnius lematzav makim achas beruchnius ba'aliyah oy biyarida oy b'shinu le'inyan acher. The Rebbe says a spiritual journey could be that you ascend, it could be that you descend, or it could be that you're switching to a different modality. Bein imidubar b'mida shebelev ava v'yira. It could be a journey that's mostly in our emotions, switching from one emotion to another, from ava to yira, let's say. It could be a spiritual journey on the cognitive level in our understanding. Or it could be in the various modalities, in the various levels in serving Hashem. Kol elu nikroim halicha b'derech beruchnius. All of the above fall under the category of journeying spiritually. Ube'inyanenu. And now let's talk more specifically about what we're discussing now, Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Hamasoi shel b'nei Yisrael mimitzrayim b'atar Sinai lo hayu rak halicha gashmis. The Rebbe says that the journey of b'nei Yisrael, the travels from Mitzrayim to Har Sinai, were not just, physical travels. Elagam ubeikar halicha ruchanis, but they also entailed, and they were in the main, about a spiritual journey. Shinui b'matzavam haruchani shel b'nei Yisrael va'aliyah b'avodas Hashem. It transformed their spiritual level and it elevated them in their service of God. Liyos kravim uru'uyim yoser lekabbalas haTorah, to be closer and more deserving to receive the Torah. Ukadisa b'sfarim, and like it's written in Sfarim, and you can see, talks about the Zohar. It's brought down in Chassidus. Shebiyosem b'Mitzrayim hayu b'nei Yisrael shkuim b'mem tesharei tuma. That when b'nei Yisrael were in Mitzrayim, they had sunk to the 49th level of tuma. Ubechol yom haisa sfira va'aliyah misha'arim elu achal achar mem tes aliyas nisalu legamrei liyas mamleches koyanim v'goy Chodesh b'matan Torah. So every single day, they counted and they ascended from these gates of impurity until, after experiencing 49 elevations, they were elevated enough to become the kingdom of priests and the holy nation and to receive the Torah. Kol oisam hamasais aliyas b'avodas Hashem hayu ba'ofen misudar. So aliyah midarga ledarga. So all of these journeys, all of these spiritual travels, all of these elevations in the service of Hashem, they were organized and they were incremental and they rose from one level to another. Aval b'masa zeh merifidim lahar Sinai haisa ha'aliyah ba'ofen shel shinui ikri. But this last journey, this last traveling from Refidim to Har Sinai was a completely different type of elevation. It was a quantum leap. Bnei Yisrael avru mercha godol beruchnius, v'yisalu be'ein aroich la'alichas ba'aliyah shel hayamim hakaimim. Bnei Yisrael undertook a journey of tremendous distance spiritually, and they were elevated incomparably to the previous halichos b'aliyah shel hayamim hakaimim, to the travels and the elevations of the days that preceded this. Move on. And so now that we understand that this last journey was of a completely different nature, and it was so extraordinary and incomparable to anything that they had experienced prior to this, so it's understood shedavar hayakaruch betircha v'yegia gedola b'avodas Hashem, that this journey entailed very great difficulty. It was very, very strenuous in the spiritual sense. In Seif Gimel, the Rebbe unpacks the distinctiveness of this last journey. Es yichudai shel masa zeh, the uniqueness of this journey, this last journey, masa zeh achron, bitu chazal b'ma'amarim hanal al pasuk v'yichad shem Yisrael ki ish echad b'lev echad. The distinctiveness, the uniqueness, the unparalleled nature of this last journey is expressed by Chazal on the words Vayichan Sham Yisrael. They describe it as Ki ish echad b'lev echad, as one person with one heart. Then Chazal continue and they say Aval sha'ar kol hachaniyos, but the rest of the encampments, the rest of the places where Bnei Yisrael rested, bitar umais ubemachlekes. They were riddled with grumbling and disagreements. Bishar kol hachaniyos hayu tarumis machlekes. In all the other restings or encampments, there were complaints and there was division and argument. V'davke b'chaniya neged ahar omtu b'nei Yisrael ba'achdus gemura ki ish echad b'lev echad. And it was only in this encampment, in this stop, that Bnei Yisrael were in a situation of complete unity. V'yesh loymar, and we might say, Perush sha'ar kol achaniyos b'tarumas machlekas einoi b'muvan apashut chas v'shalom. Okay, so here the Rebbe disabuses us of thinking that this is the pedestrian fighting and grumbling and complaining that is so inherent to the Jewish gene. He says, no, this is not regular grumbling and arguments, chas v'shalom. Don't think that this was just material, physical complaining. But rather, it's about machlekes l'shem shamayim. It's arguments for the sake of heaven. Goldie, did you raise your hand? Okay, so no worries. I see the okay. Kimitzat hateva shedbia kadosh baruch hu b'bnei adam ein deasehen shavai. So the Rebbe says, why were there arguments l'shem shamayim? Because Hashem created us in such a way that we don't all think in like manner. We all see the world through different lenses in different ways. V'yiserazu b'Torah atzma yeshnan deyes chalukos And even more so, in Torah itself, there are many different ways of understanding things. And even more, in the parentheses, the Rebbe says, V'yasal kain, lo nitnu divrei Torah chatuchen. The words of Torah we're taught were not given cut and dried. Ela kol davar, but every aspect in the Torah, you could explain mem tes panim tahar. You could adjudicate it, and you could bring 49 ways of understanding it that it's pure. Umem tes panim tame. And you could, on the other hand, bring 49 reasons or ways of understanding that it's impure, meaning there are different opinions, and there's a lot of legitimacy in all these different opinions. Like it says, ve'elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. The Gemara says, these and these are the words of the living God. Yes, in halacha there has to be one way, but in svara, in theses, in ways of understanding things, there can be many ways of understanding the same thing. So we understand that naturally, in all their other encampments and all the other stops that they made, there was machlekes l'shem shemayim. Amnam, however, b'ma'amadam neged ahar. I'm sorry, ba'amdam neged ahar. But at this moment, at this junction, standing opposite the mountain, nifal chidush ikri hefach hateva. The Rebbe says in parentheses, something novel was effectuated, which is counterintuitive to human nature. Shenizbatlu kol chilukei hadeyos v'nisachdu kulam k'ish echad v'yoser mizeh belev echad. So all of their differences were obviated, they were flattened out, and they were all united as one person, and even more so with one heart. And the Rebbe explains the difference between ish echad and lev echad. Loi raki ish echad, not only were they on the level of like being one person, hainu sha'achdos hi bekach shele'enei basar nirim kulam ki ish echad b'negei la'asiyah v'chulei. Not only did they present a united front when it came to practicalities, to asiya, so more like parents that say, okay, but when we speak to the kids, we're both going to say the same thing, right? Okay, so that's ish echad. All of Bnei Yisrael agreed, and they decided that they're going to do things in one particular way. But the Rebbe says, no, there was something more profound. Ki gam belev echad, achdus gemura gam belev regesh adam. They weren't, this wasn't just a facade. They were profoundly united on the level of the heart. A move on. So it's understood. Shatircha gedayla kazu. Hishtadlus v'yagia ruchanis lagia la'achdus ba'ifin zeh shehu mahalech godel beruchnis levatel kol tnua shel machlekes gam machlekes Hashem shemayim va'afilu b'liboy b'lvad. So the Rebbe says, now we can understand how travel weary they were, how jet lagged they were, because this was a very long and arduous journey. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of spiritual toil to arrive at this united place and to completely obviate any disagreement, even disagreement for the sake of heaven, and even disagreement that's just in your heart. So now we understand that yes, this had to cause that Bnei Yisrael should be in a state of great weakness and should feel a great weakness, so great that it wasn't appropriate for Moshe Rabbeinu to talk to them at all about anything. Dalet. Now the Rebbe is going to go deeper into this particular iteration of Chulsha de Orcha. He's going to take us deeper into the travel weariness. We might say, to look at this even more deeply, Chulsha de Orcha ain't rak inya shel chisaron. shemitzad chalishusam shel b'nei Yisrael hayu yicholim l'sasek b'achanes l'kabalas haTorah. Rebbe says, I want to explain to you that the fact that they were travel weary and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu did not speak to them about making additional and the whole kind of program of preparations for Har Sinai, for Kabbalas HaTorah. It's not just that they were experiencing a deficit and therefore practically it wasn't appropriate for Moshe Rabbeinu to talk to them. Ela adraba, on the contrary, this is actually describing an advantage that they were experiencing. It's an elevated advantage that they were experiencing. We might say, not only was this just a pragmatic thing, that they had just undergone a very arduous journey, and it wasn't appropriate for Moshe Rabbeinu to take them deeper into the preparations. No, the Rebbe says on the contrary. They were on such an elevated level, this weakness was such an elevated level, it completely eclipsed all the things they were going to do later. Okay, so the Rebbe is turning it around. It's not that they're too weak to undertake additional preparations. It's that they are in a place that completely dwarfs everything else that they were going to do following this. And the Rebbe explains, Ubahaktim, and let's preface. Ein l'shar is goydel richol ka'erach shebe Moshe Rabbeinu lepashut shebe pshutim shebe Yisrael. It's not possible to assess and to compare the great distance spiritually between Moshe Rabbeinu and a pedestrian Yid. But here the Torah says all of Bnei Yisrael rested there, Vayichan in the singular, K'ish echad b'lev echad. Hainu shekol Bnei Yisrael, mi Moshe Rabbeinu, v'ad ha'poshut shebepshutim, nisachdu ba'achdus gemura b'lev echad. They were all united, all of them, irrespective of the inconceivable difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and a simple Jew. Upshite shaloi ba'ofen shel mitzvos hanashim milamadam chas v'shalom ki ba'achdus amitis. And it's clear and simple that this wasn't just virtue signaling. It wasn't just mitzvos hanashim milamadam. This was true unity. Okay, one second. I see I have to open up the chat. Razi asks, when were they told that they'd be receiving the Torah at Sinai? I don't know. Maybe somebody knows specifically. But I'm assuming that Moshe Rabbeinu told them. What's the meaning of machlokes? Yeah, the disagreement brings to mind Rabbi Akiva's student, yes. What's the meaning of machlokes l'shem shemayim before Matan Torah? So there are many sichos where the Rebbe explains that all of the information of the Torah was already in this world. There was, and the Rebbe is going to talk about it here. There was the Rebbe is going to soon say there was yeshivas Shem Va'ever, and then Yaakov Avinu sent Yehuda Lefanav to establish yeshivas in Mitzrayim. So they had what to have a machlokes l'shem shemayim about. Yeah, Tzippa says it sounds like the Chalishos was very strong and took over all other functioning. So the Rebbe is soon going to explain what it was. Yeah, Chalishos is a form of strength. You would think that when they had such high inspiration to Chaparayin and give them heroes, no matter how hard, as we know, that you are overwhelmed with inspiration, you make a chalatzis taivis. Okay, so the Rebbe is going to speak to this soon. Okay, so going back inside. So the Rebbe says, in order to understand the true Eloi, the true elevated advantage of Chulsha de Orcha that is being referred to here, first we have to understand that the Torah tells us that there was this tremendous unity on the most profound level, which is really hard to understand. So the Rebbe says, "V'al pizeh muvan." So based on this, we understand How could there be a unity? It's because sheyesh etzel b'nei Yisrael nekuda sheba mishtavim ki ish echad b'lev echad hagadol shebigdolim v'hapashut shebepshutim. It's because every member of Klal Yisrael has a nikuda, a pintala, a core, a nexus, in which we're all equal. The greats of the greats and the simple of the simple. And this was the essence of the novelty of what happened to Bnei Yisrael when they rested opposite the mountain. When they were encamped opposite of the mountain, readying themselves to get the Torah, Nisgalsa etzlam hanikuda shebalev sheba mishtavim kulam keechad. That is the junction at which was revealed that pintale yid, that nikuda shebalev, that place where all Jews are equal. Ubazeh hu ikar teichen hachana lekabolas haTorah. And actually, this is the most essential aspect of preparation for Matan Torah. Hey, Hasbara bazeh, to further explain. Kvar nisbar ba'avar kama pa'amim be'inyan hachidush shel u'be'es Matan Torah. The Rebbe says that we've already explained many times the novelty of what happened at Matan Torah. Dilachayra, seemingly, the academic study of Torah, the information itself, was already in the world, it already existed, and for generations. The house of Yaakov had been studying, the house of the Avos, the Imais, were studying Torah. Uladugma. For example, there was Yeshiva Shem Ba'ever. Another example, Avos Shalamdu Kala Torah Kula Achalei Nitna. We know that the Avos learned the whole Torah before it was given. And it's in like fashion, their children and grandchildren in the generations before Matan Torah. Adsha Amru, until the Gemara says, Shalai Paska Yeshiva Me'avasenu b'Mitzrayim. That there never was a time in Mitzrayim where there was no yeshiva. Vim Kain, Mahaya Chidush b'Matan Torah. So what was the novelty of Matan Torah? V'nisbar shenekudas hachidushi sha'az haya Matan Torah nasan lanu es Torah soy. So there are other sichas where the Rebbe explains, of course, that the novelty was that by Matan Torah, the gezerah, the edict of the Romans can't go to Greece and the Greeks can't go to Rome, was rescinded, and it was able to be that the material realm was able to be elevated to spirituality, and that spirituality in Elokus was able to saturate the material realm. But here, the Rebbe is speaking about a different nekuda of chidush, of novelty, and that is that Matan Torah was when Hashem gave us His Torah. Shahatorah nitna al yedei noisein haTorah. It's true that the information had been made accessible, but it had not been given and imparted by a Kadosh Baruch Hu till this moment. Lifnei, and therefore, lifnei Matan Torah haisat tfisa b'Torah lefikayich hayaprati haseichel ba'bitul shekol echad. And so, therefore, before Matan Torah, how much a person was able to grasp in Torah had to do with their cognitive abilities and their bittul, their self-effacement. Ubishas Matan Torah, but by Matan Torah, nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Torah lefi oifen v'koyach hanesina sheloi. But by Matan Torah, it was a whole different thing because the Eibishter gave the Torah in accordance with the transcendent energies and abilities of the Eibishter. B'Matan Torah ksiv, vayidaber Elokim es kol hadvarim leimor. it says about Matan Torah that Hashem spoke all these things, saying, Leimar Hashem vayidaber Elokim, giving them the ability to transmit what Hashem spoke to them. And after this, Moshe Rabbeinu taught on the mountain the entire Torah the way that Hashem gave it to him. And the Rebbe says, this wasn't a one-time event. Because from that moment of the Eibishter giving us the Torah, Nasan v'hichnis HaKadosh Baruch Hu kavyachal es atzmai b'Torah. Hashem gave us Himself. Hashem put herself into the Torah kavyachal keperish hayidua b'maimar Chazal, very famous Gemara on the word Anochi. That Anochi is an acrostic for the words Ana Nafshi Ksavis Yehavis. Hashem says, I wrote myself into the Torah. Ad shebe'esh Yehudi loimet Torah. So much so that when a Jew learns Torah, be'eza b'chol zman she'iyeh, at any time in history, Olav lahakdim and at any time of the day, Olav lahakdim es amir v'abracha nasan lanu es Torah. A Jew can't learn Torah before they make the Birchas HaTorah, where we say Hashem gave us His Torah. And in the words of the Tanchuma, when we learn Torah, Oy siatem leichem. Hashem says, you're taking me. V'zehu hachidush shel va'ata niglesa chulei sheb'matan Torah. This is the novelty of the revelation of Matan Torah. It wasn't just that there was additional information and that it was now an elevated field of study. But rather there was a novelty that was incomparable to what was happening earlier, Lifnei Matan Torah. Because Lifnei Matan Torah, Kishalim Torah Hayim Mitzat Koyach Shel Adam, Koyach HaSeichel, move on, Shahaloimet Tafas Min HaTorah, Rak Ad Kama Shahaya B'Koyach Lahasig Michachmasa Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because until Matan Torah, a person was able to grasp as much as they could grasp through their cognitive abilities. Every person different. Masha Enkin La'achrei Matan Torah, but in contradistinction after Matan Torah, Limud HaTorah hu ba'ofen shehaloimed miskasher al yidei zeh im noisen HaTorah atzmai shenasan v'hichnis es atzmai b'torasai. But after Matan Torah, it's not a field of study, a science to be grasped. Limud HaTorah is about connecting through this with the noisen HaTorah, essentially, who gave us the Torah and inserted himself into the Torah.
That's why the Gashmias can be elevated, because it has that godly quality. The mitzvahs that we do after Matan Torah, because the Eibishter endued it with such godliness, it has the Eibishter in it. Therefore, it has the power to affect the Gashmias. Both reasons really are connected. No?
It could be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think here the Rebbe is more focusing on the change in the experience of learning the Torah.
Right, but I'm saying the reason that there's a difference, what you mentioned before about Elyonim and Tachtainim, it's because it has that quality of Elikus that it didn't have before.
Yeah, and therefore could surmount all the Hagbalas.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you, Hindi. Vav. And now we're able to discern the connection between what it says, that they encamped there like one man with one heart. Hachilukim b'limet HaTorah shebein b'nei Yisrael ad lechiluk hachigodol shebein Moshe Rabbeinu lepashas shebepshutim heim b'negei lahasagas HaTorah. Because the differences in learning Torah that are inherent to the mass of Bnei Yisrael until you get to the starkest difference, the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and a simple Jew. This is all about being able to grasp Torah. Yehudi Pliny mitzat koiches nafshoy yesh havana gedola v'nalis yosef b'Torah masher l're'eu ad l'chiluk shebe'ein arech. Because of course there are going to be differences in terms of how much people can grasp and in which way they grasp it, right? Different types of learners and so on and so forth, until you're going to have incomparable differences, like between Moshe Rabbeinu and a Pasha Shebib Shutim.
Doesn't this sound similar to Simchas Torah, the whole idea?
Yeah. Aval etzem hadavar sheyehudi miskashem misachid al yidei limud haTorah v'nasa kula chad im noisen haTorah harei zeh begadol shebigdolim ubekatan shebektanim. But this essential, novel aspect of a Jew connecting and becoming unified through limud haTorah with Hashem, becoming one, this is a great equalizer. This is uniform by every Jew. Ukesha amru oisi atem leichem. And when Chazal said that when a Yid learns Torah, it's like you're taking Hashem, hare eitzel ish pashut shalemid mikra, asher afilu k'shei mevim ha-shalom chayiv l'haktiv v'nasalanu es terasa kanal, zeu oisi sheyeshna eitzel lamdil gadol bal hasaga. This is so much so the case that it's equal by all Jews, that when you learn Torah, you're taking Hashem. The Rebbe says it's oisai atem leichem. It's the same taking or fusing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's a person that could only, quote unquote, learn Chumash. And by the way, the halacha is, even if you don't understand, you still have to say the Birchas HaTorah, and you have to reference that you're the Noisen HaTorah because you're connecting with the Torah. And it's equal by this person as it is by the great Baal Hasaga, the great intellectual, V'havana Amuka B'yoseh B'Torah HaMachadish B'chidushim Amitiyim. Even a person who's so learned that they're constantly generating chidushim, novelties. Maybe they're the head of a yeshiva, etc. And the Rebbe says, "Ha'ilui shel oisiatem loichim," and this exalted, spectacular level of oisiatem loichim, that through learning Torah, we're taking Hashem. Einai musag al yedei koichaisav ha'ishim. This is not something you could grasp through your personal cognitive abilities. It's not something that we can do on our own. Elaba milmaila, ki nasan lanu es teirasai. This comes in transcendent fashion from above. This is because Hashem gave us His Torah. Ve'inyan zeh kasher lelev shel b'nei Yisrael. And this connection comes via the heart, not the mind. That the Rebbe is now here circling back to the term ki ish echad belev echad. It doesn't say ki ish echad b'moyach echad. It says belev echad. Ki b'pnimius v'nekudas halev shel Yehudi me'ira hayechida shebenefesh. Because in the innermost recesses of the heart is nestled and glows the Yechida Shebenefesh. Shehi Lemaila Legamri Mehasagasai Ulemaila Mitam Vadas. And this level is completely higher than what this person can grasp cognitively. It's higher than logic. Shekei Benekuda Zu Nimtzeis Ha'emuna Shekol Echan Miyisrael B'Hashem Lemaila Mitam Vadas. Because in this Nekuda Shebenefesh is found faith, the faith of each Jew, ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, and that is higher than cognition, it's higher than logic, it's higher than understanding. And now we're able to appreciate and understand in a whole different way this term that they rested there like one person with one heart. Kishachanu neged ahar, when they rested, when they encamped opposite the mountain, b'makam hamiyuad l'maimed Har Sinai, in the place that was designated Har Sinai, that was designated for the event that would take place at Har Sinai, Matan Torah. Oirer hadavar etzlam eses galus primius v'nekudas halev. So what happened when they encamped there? It aroused the revelation of this most essential core, shehi b'chol b'nei Yisrael b'shava, and this is found by all of Klal Yisrael equally. Ba'al yedei gilui hanekuda shebelev nasu kli le'elokus sheb'Torah. And it was through revealing this nikuda shebelev that they became a proper vessel and a conduit for the elokus, for the godliness that is in Torah. El vayidaber elokim, they became a kli to hear what Hashem is saying, ba'ofen shel lemar, in a way that they would later be able to impart it. I'm going to just look now at the chat. This idea that it's equal for most simple and most sophisticated thinkers speaks to the idea of bringing even the babies to hear Aseres HaDibros. Yeah. How can they be on the level of Yicham before Matan Torah? There wasn't Nisan HaTorah yet. I think the Rebbe just explained now. So maybe, Elisheva, your question was right before we did this last paragraph, that the Rebbe explains that here the words are Oirer Hadavar Etzlam Isis Galos Pnimius V'Nekudas Halev. When they reached there, when they encamped there was a transformation that overtook them. Miriam is saying, I'd love to see how we can rewrite our own moments of tiredness to reflect this deep and beautiful idea. So the Rebbe is soon going to explain that this tiredness is a level of, and I already did, a level of bittul, of obviating distinctions. How does Emunah fit in? And in the last words here, the Rebbe said that this Nikudas Halev is where, actually it's in the second to last paragraph, this is where Emunah is found. Shekein b'nekuda zu nimtzeis Emunah shekol echad miYisrael b'Hashem. That the Emunah flows from this deepest core of our hearts.
But Emunah is much deeper than the heart.
The Rebbe says that that's where it's found. Look to the last few lines. In the second to last paragraph. Let's read the whole paragraph. Ve'ini zeh kosher lelev shel b'nei Yisrael. Ki bepnimius unekudas halev shel Yehudi me'ira hayechida shebenefesh. Shehi l'mayla legamri mehasagaso l'mayla mitam vadas. So the Rebbe says that in the heart is where this nekuda pnimius, this innermost core, is found. That is where the yechida shebenefesh illuminates, and the yechida and this core is lamayla legamri mehasagaso or lamayla mitam vadas. It's higher than cognition. It's higher than logic. And then the Rebbe says, "Shechein b'nekuda zu nimtzeis emuna shekol echad miYisrael b'Hashem." And it's in this innermost core that is found the emuna in Hashem, lamayla mitam vadas, that is completely transcendent above tam vadas. Elza is saying if all Yidden were in the same mind and heart, it means Moshe was included, and yet they decided then according to rank, but it would explain what was told to them the second day. Okay, Elza, perfect segue into our next seif. And then Tzippa saying is a connection specifically Velev, meaning it's emotional in the midas.
You just answered it in that last paragraph.
Yeah. I don't think it's about, okay. Zayin. However, okay, so this is all a very transcendent level, and it's all amazing, and they're all by Yichan Sham, Negedahar, and they're all on this level that's Lamaila Mitam Vadas, it's Lamaila Mehasaga, it's such an exalted place. But the Rebbe says, Hachana shel vayichan shem Yisrael b'lev echad, hirak Hadarga harishona ba'achana lamatan Torah. But this is just the staging ground. It's the first darga. It's the first level. Everything else is going to build on this. Al yedei hamayla hanifla shel habitul va'achdos nasa adam kli Torah. First, you have to have the vayichan. First, you have to have the superlative advantage of bittul and achdos. Ulam tachlis haterahi sheyilmidua. But let's not forget that the tachlis, the goal of Torah, is that it should be studied. Bahavana v'hasaga. It should be done with your cognition, with your understanding. Ubehetem lazeh nidrash seder sholem shalachanas l'kras matan Torah. And for this reason, it is necessary to have an ordered and incremental, like a full program of readying oneself for Matan Torah. Hakavana shel Matan Torah hi sha'adam yis'ached im HaTorah ad shetahafech la'etzem chayusay mitziyosay. What's the main intention? What's the ultimate intention of Torah? That the person should become fused with the Torah until the Torah becomes their essence and their vivifying force, becomes their existence. V'lachein, and therefore, behechach shateret hitafes gam al yidei limud. Havanas haseichel. And therefore, it's absolutely imperative that the Torah should be integrated in and grasped and internalized through study, through understanding, through cognition. Because without that, we leave the most definitive aspect of our humanity behind. The Eibusher doesn't want robots. The Eibusher doesn't want Ottomans. The Eibusher is not looking for AI. The Eibusher is looking that we should be transformed completely. So it has to begin with Hasaga. Well, that's not the beginning. The beginning is the complete bittul and achtos. But then there has to be the Hasaga. Kasher adam mevi inyan besichloi nitfas hamuskol besichloi at shenasa chelek mimitziusoi. When a person understands something with their seichel, then the idea, the concept, is grasped in their cognition until it becomes part of their existence. Al derech hamazon delechem anasa damabasar kipsari. In the same way that the nutrition from your food becomes part of your flesh and blood, and you can't eviscerate it, you can't separate it. Ubaloshanatanya nasa yichud nifla bein hamaskil v'hamuskal. There is an awesome fusion and union between the understander and what they are grasping. V'nimtza she'al yedei hasagas haTorah dvar havaya shelemayla me'olam legamrei, that when you grasp the Torah, which is the word of Hashem, dvar havaya, which is higher than the world completely, nitvas b'toich nafshe shel Yehudi ad shemisachid u'misyachid imoy. So this is grasped within the soul of a Jew until the Jew becomes one, completely one with Hashem. Ve'elu hayu shnei sugei hachana shel bnei Yisrael lekabbalas haTorah. And so here we see the two modalities of preparation for Matan Torah. Ha'achana harishon leMatan Torah hisakanal vayichan sham Yisrael keshechad b'lev echad tachlis habitul. The first hachana is self-effacement, abnegation. Shapal shebnei Yisrael yiyu keshechad b'lev echad ha'achana ha'klolish shel klal Yisrael ke'echad. Okay, this affected Bnei Yisrael, that they became like one person with one heart, and this was the overarching preparation, and this soldered together all of Bnei Yisrael. They became ke'echad. Amnam, however, miyom sheni b'Sivan hitchil Moshe l'sasik imayim be'inyan kabbalas haTorah. But then, building on this basis, from the second day of Sivan, Moshe Rabbeinu started to engage with them in all of the necessary preparations for Kabbalah Satira. Vakavana bazeh hilinyane hachana hapoelim shemitzias adam. We'll go back to parentheses. Tia kli kibul matim v'roy lekabbalah Satira. So he engaged with them in all the various preparations that were necessary so that the person, their entire persona, now let's look at the parentheses, not only on that core level, but in their entirety, they should become a proper vessel for receiving the Torah. For becoming a nation, a kingdom of priests. And then the mitzvahs Hagbala Prisha, and then the next day was the commandments about how far and how close they could go, and then the next day was the separation between women and their husbands, Kedei Lakadosh is B'nai Yisrael, in order to sanctify them for the event of Matan Torah. Now the Rebbe says in this second modality, in this second cohort of preparations, elu yeshnam chilukim bein b'nei Yisrael. Here, yes, you're going to find differences. Ish lefi madrigasa b'avodas Hashem. Each person according to their level. Ad shematzinu b'kabbalas haTorah atzma chilukim bein b'nei Yisrael. And as we find that during Matan Torah, there were different sections. There were box seats, and then there was, sitting closer in the lower in the arena, and etc., etc. Moshe mechitza la'atzmai v'chulei. Moshe had his own separated place. Aval etzel kulam parcha nishmasam al kol dibur b'dibur. So yes, there were differences, there were distinctions, there were separations, but all of them experienced this parcha nishmasam, that their souls left them for every one of the dibur. And this, the Rebbe says, is the understanding of Moshe not saying anything to them, not even one word, because of their weak state due to their travel. Orchazu, this journey, ha'halicha haruchanis el matzav shel ichud kol b'nei Yisrael Moshe Rabbeinu b'ad ha'pasha shel Yisrael. This journey of unifying all of Bnei Yisrael, from Moshe Rabbeinu until the most simple Jew, Garma Chulsha Limal Yusa. Usually we think of weakness as being a deficit, but the Rebbe said that this great journey caused a weakness that is an advantage.
Like vulnerability?
Sorry?
Like vulnerability.
I think it's about, look, he says, Chalishus ubitul b'bnei Yisrael. It broke down all the distinctions between Bnei Yisrael, and it broke down the way in which they might have felt that they're better than somebody else or different. And so in conformity with this level, he didn't say anything to them because hachanazu ena inishal amira kim inishaloy amar shtika ubitel. Because when it comes to this level of breaking down all distinctions, this weakness of the selfhood, there are no words. The only modality that's appropriate is loy amar, complete silence, complete bittul. There's something transcendent that you can't legislate, you can't describe, you can't give instructions. And after they came to this state of self-abnegation that brought them to a place of ish echad b'lev echad, then nidrash mikol Yisrael lehitnatek mibitel otzum zeh v'la'asek b'shar inyonei achana. Then the Jews had to cut themselves off from this level of self-abnegation, and they had to engage in the various appropriate means of preparation. Ki dafka al yedei mismalas tachlis hatera, because it's only through each person preparing in a way that's appropriate for their level that you can fulfill the goal of the Torah, which is yichud nifla yachad im oisi atem lekchem, creating a wondrous fusion and unity with oisi, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, oisi atem lekchem, you're taking me. So that's our sicha, and